And welcome back. Sebring in Alamosa, California. Sebring, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about the inception of government. You see, I can't build roads by myself. I can't make hospitals by myself. I can't make educational institutions by myself. But I have a government that has the ability to do all of that, and that's why I pay taxes. Now, under this system that we've got, with all of these people that are supposed to be our representatives, and they're supposed to be working for us, and they're just like a plumber working for us. They don't do the job. What we should do is fire them. And all of this stuff that they're doing about the health care, what they shouldn't even, I think it's treasonous. And what people should do is, we do have the power to recall all of these people. And there should be, instead of all these mass demonstrations, there should be a mass recall of all of those people that commit this treasonous act. And I was just wondering, what's your idea about that?
Sure. I'll tell you, well, having just gone through a recall in Wisconsin for governor that was not successful, and granted, this might be a bit more of an upper Midwest thing because people in the upper Midwest are fundamentally kind, nice people. It didn't go over well because people thought there's an election process to take care of that. Special elections turnout never is generally on our side when you have a special election around recalls. But I will say, elections have consequences. We have 2018 before us, and some states, even this year, they have state legislative races. This is where if people won't change their ways and if you don't agree with their positions, you can change the faces of those who represent us. But we have to keep this activism and reality of what happened in 2016 and now make sure that we do everything we can to make sure people get out to vote. When people get out to vote, we know they agree with us on issues, and we can transform not just our country, but our states and our local communities. So, as someone who went through a recall and did a lot of hard work during that, we always wind up having lower turnout. And watching a special election in Georgia and other places, the turnout is always not, that high. I think let's just build that energy to get good candidates and go within the cycle, but let's change the faces of those who are not doing the bidding on behalf of the people.
Congressman, I think we have about 45 seconds here, not enough to put another caller on before the break. Wasn't the thing that saved Scott Walker not so much, nice Wisconsinites, but the Koch brothers and friends throwing millions of dollars into the race with ads that said, hey, we're nice. We don't do this kind of thing. I mean, wasn't that kind of a manufactured thing?
It's a combination. I mean, it was 40-some% a couple months out didn't like the idea of a recall. On Election Day, it was 70% of people who voted didn't like the idea of a recall. But I also, heard it anecdotally from folks. I mean, they saw a normal election process. And we had a long statutory gap also that didn't help from when we could start a recall to when it happened. People had forgot some of the instances that kind of brought it to us.
So it got dragged out.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It is, by the way, also the anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City back in the day. 68 or 69, as I recall. I think it was 68, wasn't it, Congressman?
Yes, and what's interesting is when you think about the statues that are in, I think it's called Christopher Park right there in Greenwich Village, there was a controversy because they were of two men and two women, whether or not they could be placed. And while they were finding a location in New York City, their temporary home was Madison, Wisconsin, in my district. We had them in a park in Orton Park in the Isthmus of Madison.
Oh, isn't that great? That is spectacular. Mydell, if I'm saying it right, in Port Charlotte, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan, and please correct me if I've said your name wrong.
Nidal, thank you, Tom.
Nidal, okay.
I have two questions, if you don't mind. The first one, why is it that the United States is going against the Assad government, considering that they look the other way while the Israelis are committing genocide against the Palestinians? And the second question, why is it that the United States government is doing nothing against the Islamic State in concern to the Christian and non-Muslim sex slaves that the Islamic State having in the custody? after all, the Islamic State is American financed. And I'll take my answer after here. Thank you.
Okay.
The
A lot to
second
unpack
one,
there.
I'm not sure if I agree with the contention on it at all, but on the first one, I think this is a classic example of, how we sometimes pick certain fights rather than others when, human rights should be at the forefront of, I think, everything we do, because we should lead that moral imperative if we're going to be doing things. And there's, again, diplomacy is the best way to always go forward on it. So there's plenty of, I think, inconsistencies with U.S. policy, and I think, you're right in the sense that there are many players that are hurting the people of Syria. However, when the government is one of those players, clearly I think we have to recognize that as well and say that's a problem.
Timothy in Minneapolis, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Excuse me, I had to take off anyway, Congressman Pocan and Thom. I was calling about the reauthorization of the pre-clearance of the Voting Rights Act. Congress has been sitting on it for 4 years. When is that coming to an end, and can we get that done before the 2018 election?
Yeah, Timothy, I wish I had a better answer for you then. I doubt the Republicans are going to make a priority. We know they're the ones who've led these initiatives state by state to make it harder for people to vote because they want to pick their voters rather than voters picking their elected officials, whether it be photo ID or ending early voting or other restrictions when you can register to be able to vote. So as much as it absolutely should be a no-brainer, this Congress sometimes has no brains. And I don't think you're going to probably see that move forward, unfortunately, at a federal level.
Chris in Akron, Ohio, listening on Sirius XM. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. How are you? Thom,
hey, good, Chris.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
My question for you is, whether it be Trump Care, a variation of it, Obamacare, and they retweak it, whatever, why is it that Congress isn't mandated to accept what everybody else is going to receive, however it ends up, whether you're pro-Obamacare, pro-Trump Care, whatever? Why are there specific people, including Congress and teachers' unions, why isn't everybody mandated to be under the same rules that they would then vote for? And I think we get a better program if the Congress was forced to utilize whatever is passed. So,
yeah, Chris. So interestingly, the Republicans, when Affordable Care Act was passed, did mandate that members of Congress had to be part of that. So I'm part of the Affordable Care Act, as are all members of Congress, and it's been a great healthcare system. I've had absolutely no problems whatsoever. So in this case, they're taking healthcare away by getting rid of the bill. I guess you could say members of Congress wouldn't have health insurance, but then you'd have different treatment of federal employees, and that could be an issue. But it's not like where we created a plan and they're saying now you have to have it. In this case, they're destroying a plan. Trump Care really should be called Trump Don't Care, right? There's not a health care plan left. There's a Band-Aid or two around high-risk pools, and I guess you could argue you could mandate people into high-risk pools who are members of Congress. But it's a little different situation because where we created a health care plan, essentially, they're taking it away. So I think that may be the difficulty. But I certainly understand your point of the inconsistency of Congress and how we are treated versus their lack of respect for people's health care.
Steve in Long Island, New York. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good afternoon, Thom and Congressman Program. It has become evident to me that some healthcare insurance companies use a third-party provider, administrator, in which they set the fees that on certain treatments to the people that are receiving the benefits. They're unwilling to budge in most cases and change the way things are, the fees are. Is there any way we can address that? Because it looks like it's another way that the insurance companies are just shorting the person holding the insurance.
Steve, I think if I can answer it this way, part of all our debate has been is trying to work with the existing model. And I think what we're finding is there are plenty of problems with the existing model. Previously, people who actually needed health care couldn't get access, which is why we got rid of the people, the ability for people who have pre-existing conditions should be able to get health care. And we're always going to be fighting probably some front on this angle until you have that health care is a right in a civilized country like Canada and most of Europe, that we have a system like that in place. So, I think if there are specific issues we can try to address within a bill, we can try to, understanding the Republicans are in charge and their health care bill actually was a tax break bill, so it shows they don't care about health care. Or do we really organize around where I think we ultimately will wind up as a country, because I think I see the public support for it, which is around a single-payer system, which is, again, I think absolutely the direction we have to move.
Yeah. Congressman, we have a minute and a half left before the end of the show. It's not quite enough to put a caller on. Your thoughts about what's coming up in the next week and what people should be paying attention to, and where are the places where people should be applying pressure, whether it's making phone calls or showing up or hitting a website or whatever?
Well, there's a unique week coming up because we're going home. We've been out here for the last 4 weeks. We're going home for a week, then we're back out here for 3 weeks after that. This is your opportunity to meet face-to-face in district with your elected officials at the federal level. They'll be at parades because of July 4th. Seems to be like candy to a child, as it is to politicians. They'll be there. Take advantage of that, and make them have to answer questions. The best free advice I have is someone nods their head when you're talking to them. That doesn't mean they agree with you. That means they have the muscles in the back of their neck that allow their head to bob. Make them give you no's and yeses about what you ask them, and hold them accountable. And be polite as you do it. It's important. Don't give them excuses not to do town halls. That's what they're trying to do now. But be forceful and make them give you answers. You're their bosses.
What do you do if your congressperson is doing these so-called phone-in town halls, so that they can, which I think are kind of phony town halls, but where the questions are carefully curated and only a certain number of people can call in and all that?
Yeah, they're paid infomercials, right? I mean, you're not taking your questions. They already know what questions they're going to take. Just don't accept that. Tell them you want a live in-person town hall, and in a lot of these districts, people are doing them with cardboard cutouts. I think that's great. And in many districts, we're having Democrats start to go into Republican districts. I'm going to go back in Paul Ryan's district over the break in 2 different communities. We've got to hold them accountable for their actions.
That is great. What are the communities in Paul Ryan's district where you're going to be holding town halls in the coming few days?
Racine and Walworth County on July 8th, Saturday, July 8th.
Racine and Walworth County. Great. Congressman Pocan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, as always. Appreciate it.
Great talking with you. It's our Midday with Mark segment. We'll be back right after.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.